Hello, everyone, and welcome to our online program on how the landscape has changed for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program and what you need to know. My name is Matt Reifer. I'm the Vice President and Advocacy Counsel at the American Council of Engineering Companies. I'll be moderating today's session. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. We will be recording today's session, and a link to the recording and copies of the presentation slides will be shared with everyone who registered. If you've got general comments or would like to interact with other attendees, you can please feel free to use the chat feature. If you've got a question specifically for our speakers on the content, we ask that you submit it through the Q&A panel so that we can track and address questions during the discussion. We're going to have dedicated time at the end of the program for Q&A, which I will be moderating, but you're welcome to submit your questions at any point during today's session. We had more than 600 registrants for this program. Interest is high, so I'm going to guess we probably won't be able to get to every question that gets submitted. We'll do our best to address as many as possible, and we're going to try to focus on those questions with broad applicability. ACEC is really proud to join our partners today in the Engineering Workforce Consortium, the American Society of Civil Engineers, and the American Public Works Association in sponsoring this timely program. The Engineering Workforce Consortium is a first-of-its-kind joint effort focused on addressing and providing solutions to the workforce shortage facing the engineering and public works industries. The consortium brings together a diverse collection of voices from across government, industry, and academia to pool resources and amplify the need to expand the STEM workforce. The mission of the EWC is to attract the next generation of engineering talent, retain the existing workforce in engineering and public works, and advocate for industry growth and sustainability. The EWC co-chairs and many of our members have been closely monitoring the changes to the Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. The legal challenges pending in federal court and the related regulatory changes in the recently published DOT Interim Final Rule have significant implications for the procurement of engineering services, subcontracting and teaming among firms, and entrepreneurship and economic development. We're pleased to be joined today by three experts to walk through the latest developments and what practitioners need to know. First up is Danielle Dietrich. She's a partner with Potomac Law Group and has over 20 years of experience representing small businesses, large corporations, public utilities, universities, businesses, school districts, individuals, hospitals, in a wide variety of claims involving contract matters, intellectual property issues, collections, employment, and governance and growth. Her particular expertise is the representation of small, disadvantaged, disabled, minority, women, veteran, and LGBT-owned businesses. Danielle assists her clients with obtaining and maintaining diversity certifications, identifying and resolving potential problems, and representing them when certifications are denied or at risk of being revoked. Needless to say, Danielle has been extremely busy of late, and we're really pleased that she's able to join us today and share her expertise. Next up will be Jennifer Todd. She's the founder and executive director of A Greener Tomorrow, a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to advancing equity, workforce development, innovation, and representation in construction and skilled trades. They provide strategic leadership, governance, and organizational oversight, directing national programs and partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and industry associations. Jennifer's also spearheaded Breaking Barriers, Women at Work, a nationally distributed docuseries amplifying women leaders in construction. And prior to these new ventures, she was the owner of LMS General Contractors, a certified minority-owned business managing federal disaster recovery and grants, where she oversaw multi-million HUD, CDBG, and FEMA public assistance projects. So she's got a lot of experience in this field. Lastly, Tim Peters is the local policy and technology engineer with the Illinois Department of Transportation. In that role, Tim is responsible for IDOT's Bureau of Local Roads and Streets Manual and IDOT's Local Technical Assistance Program. He's been in that role for 10 years, but he's been with IDOT for over 33 years. His prior assignment was in the Bureau of Operations. He's been a part of the leadership team with the National Local Technical Assistance Program Association, and he's also an APWA board member in the Illinois chapter and active in supporting learning and educational activities in the Chicago Metro chapter. So we're so thrilled that all three of our speakers can be with us today to share their perspectives. And with that, Danielle, I will turn the program over to you.
Great, thank you. So let me share my screen here. All right, so thank you everyone for having me today. Thank you for such great attendance here. As was mentioned, it's been a very busy time for me. I've been working with DBEs since I think 2018, 2019 is when I really started doing this work. And I work with DBEs, everything from formation to appeals of decertification, succession planning, everything. So when this broke, it was obviously, a big time for me. I blog on it a lot. I also do YouTube videos where I've talked about a lot of this in more detail. So there will be a link at the end to my YouTube page. Still not used to saying that. A partner of mine suggested it last year, but it's been a great way to get some information across to everyone. So we have a small amount of time today. So I'm really just going to kind of hit a lot of the basics and let you know sort of my view of what's going on. So first, just to give a really quick general overview of the DBE and AC DBE program. Just for simplicity, I'm just going to use the term DBE, but it really encompasses both. DBE is the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, whereas ACDBE is the Airport Concessions Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. There's a lot of overlap. The rules are pretty much the same with a few little things here and there. So to be one of these, you have to be a small business per the SBA size standards, and that is based on your NAICS code. Your company has to be at least 51% owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals, also called CEDOs. And what this is really where the change is hitting everybody, because prior to October 3rd, there were certain categories of folks who were presumed, and it was a rebuttable presumption, to be socially and economically disadvantaged. That included women and people of certain ethnic backgrounds. The DBE program is used really on federally assisted contracts having to do mainly with transit, highway, aviation, as well as airports. It encompasses a wide variety of business. So anybody who touches upon those things may seek benefit from a DBE program, whether that's a contractor, whether that's someone operating a kiosk at the airports. So it really goes widely across the board, and obviously engineers are a big part of that. I have a lot of engineering clients that are DBEs. And this is not a certification that is used in private industry. This is for federally funded projects. And the program is administered, even though it's a federal program, it's administered at the state level by state UCPs. The reason we're all here is because at the end of September, the day before the government shutdown, the U.S. Department of Transportation issued this interim final rule that has everybody in a tizzy. This came with absolutely no warning to any of the DBEs or to any of the certifying agencies. So poor Tim and his colleagues have kind of been through it here because this was just dropped on them. It was formally published on October 3rd, and it didn't come out in the way rules usually do when there's rule changes. Usually there is a notice and comment period, and all of that is taken into consideration and a final rule is made. Here, that didn't happen. They dropped the rule. There was opportunity to comment until November 3rd, but whether those comments will do anything remains to be seen. The interim final rule provided that the presumption of social and disadvantaged individuals of certain races and sex would no longer be there. That presumption would no longer be there. Instead, everyone has to make an individualized showing via a written personal narrative talking about how they have been disadvantaged, and it's not supposed to rely on race or sex. There were a lot of questions. This was not a detailed interim final rule. And then a few weeks later, the US DOT did issue a set of facts, frequently asked questions, that did answer a few things, but again, created a whole lot of questions. And there are still a whole lot of questions about this process. So some of you may have questions that we just don't have answers to yet. And so every single DBE has to be recertified. Every single DBE owner that is disadvantaged is going to have to write one of these personal narratives. So where are we? Every UCP is having to do this. There are no set procedures set forth in this rule or the guidance, so they're all kind of figuring it out. One thing that did come out in the facts that was great, because it was a big concern prior to that, was you only have to be recertified first in your home state, or they also call it JOC, Jurisdiction of Original Certification. So if you are DBE certified in multiple states, which many of my clients are, initially the thought was, oh my goodness, do we have to go get certified in every single state? How is that going to work? And it was kind of chaos because, Virginia, for instance, set a really early deadline, and all my clients who were interstate certified in Virginia were scrambling to try to figure out if they needed to submit something. But the FAQs came out and said, no, the first thing to do is you need to get recertified in your home state. And we will talk later on in a few minutes about what to do once you get through that process and want to get into other states. There's no set deadline. It's supposed to be as quickly as practicable, for whatever that means. And only a handful of states have really started the process. Illinois and Ohio are amongst the leaders from everything I've been watching and seeing. So very excited to have Tim here today from Illinois to share with us sort of what they're going through. Every UCP is having to establish their own process, so it's taking some time. Again, there's no precedent in place for this. It just kind of came out of nowhere. One thing to also be aware of is that the UCPs do not have to follow the decertification process that normally takes place, which involves a hearing, certain notices, because of everybody having to be recertified. They said you don't have to follow that process. The USDOT did say that you can appeal if you are not recertified to the USDOT. However, I don't know how they are going to view these because it is very discretionary. It is subjective entirely. There's not objective factors necessarily to check off a box. And the USDOT also has not been issuing appeal decisions at all, even prior to the interim final rule, since the new administration took place in January. So how that process could potentially go, we don't know. All right, personal narratives. And this is what has everybody really scrambling to try to figure out what to do. So each disadvantaged owner, not one per business, one per disadvantaged owner. So if you have two individuals who own a total of 60% and are considered disadvantaged, each of those two individuals has to write a personal narrative. The non-disadvantaged owners don't have to write one. But everybody has to do it, and you have to show specific concrete examples of social and economic disadvantage without relying on sex or race. And so that is given people a lot of problems. I think thinking about it, because we've been thinking about the disadvantaged portion of this program in a certain way for so long, getting outside that is really throwing some people for a loop. And you have to show that your disadvantaged situation has impeded your progress in education, employment, and or business. And you have to show how the harm has taken place. So to talk about what kind of harm, what kind of economic harm in particular has come out of this. So for example, somebody with a physical disability, maybe it is someone that needs to use a wheelchair, and they can say, look, I have this disability and it has prevented me from doing X, Y, and Z. I can't always access certain networking events, for example, and that has led to less business. So when you're thinking about these things, it's kind of thinking about the snowball effect of one thing and then all the potential things that come out of it is the way that I've been telling folks to think about it. So to go over a few tips that I've been giving for personal narratives, and again, there's a whole lot more to talk about, but I want to give everyone an idea of what they should be thinking about. You want to be as factual and specific as possible. So just saying, yeah, I'm disadvantaged because I have a speech impediment and it's cost me business. That's very vague. That is not helpful. So you need to talk about specific example, or for instance, someone who is a caregiver of an elderly and infirm, parent, has to come home from work every night to care for that parent, can't go to certain events or certain job sites that operate at night and things like that. So you want to be specific and you want to talk about your personal experience. This isn't about the experience of your grandparents 75 years ago. This is about you. And you want to tie each of these barriers to the outcome. Saying if you lost income, excuse me, if you lost out on bids, getting, poor financing terms or not even being able to get financing is a big one. Again, talking about that snowball effect, what each of these things sort of led to. And you want to connect it again to the economic effects. There's a big emphasis on that from all the guidance that I have seen. You want to try to align to your industry and market where you can. And again, the more detail, the better. I've filmed some YouTube videos. They're short, they're like 10 minutes or so. That talk about more tips and more ideas. Just if you want more information, you can go there and get some more of my thoughts on that. Some examples of potential social or economic disadvantage that is not tied to race or sex. And again, this is thinking outside of that box that we've all been thinking in for so long. Do you come from a poor educational background? Were you, going to an underfunded school growing up? And, how did that affect your education and ability to succeed? Do you have a disability? Poor digital literacy. I have heard from some clients that they went to school in the 90s when computers were really getting big and prevalent, and their school might have only had 2 computers, and they get to college and they don't even have the first clue how to use a computer, even the basics. Immigration status. Immigration status can affect your ability to get a job because you may need an employer to sponsor your H-1B visa. Do you have an accent? Difficulty with English language skills. And this isn't just somebody from another country. This can be somebody from within the US that maybe grew up in a family and area that had extremely poor grammar or a heavy accent or just, said things funny. I'm from Pittsburgh and we have all kinds of our own words that we use here. Example for me, I went to college and I never knew that dropping your to be verbs was wrong. And saying my car needs to be washed is proper, but I would say my car needs washed. I didn't realize that was wrong. So that's just a little example. It's not a big thing, but those sorts of differences are things to think about if they ever affected you. Caregiver status I already mentioned. Have you been a victim of sexual harassment? That is certainly something that can affect you professionally, personally, and economically. Have you lacked access to capital or credit? Getting started in your business, were you able to get financing? Were you able to get credit to purchase materials? What were the terms? Were they really high interest rates as compared to anybody else? Say along those terms, high insurance rates. Some of these jobs that you all are on have really high insurance requirements, and that can be really cost prohibitive for a small business. Do you operate out of an economically challenged locale? And do you have a lack of trained workforce in your area? Maybe if you're in a rural area, there's not a whole lot of folks to work from for your workforce. Okay. In addition, you also need to include a new personal net worth statement. Even if you just did one in the last year, it doesn't matter. Everyone's got to put one in. And there's a new form, and I'm going to show you what that looks like on the next slide. So I do want to make sure everybody knows that because I would say about half my clients don't realize that there's a new form. The cap changed last year. The personal net worth cap used to be 1.32 million. It is now 2.047 million, which is great. But in addition, you do not count your ownership in the certified DBE business or the business that's trying to get certified, ownership in your primary home, and as of last year, your qualified retirement accounts are not included in that calculation. And so that has given everybody a little bit of breathing room. Prior to last year, that hadn't been changed in forever. So I also have a link here to the new personal net worth statement, and the slides will be sent out to everyone afterwards. Also, if you just Google DBE personal net worth statement, it should take you to the US DOT page that hosts that. So this is what the personal net worth statement now looks like. The first couple pages are all instructions. And then once you start entering information, you get to this. So whenever you're doing your personal net worth statement, make sure you have the correct form because it's going to make a big difference. You don't want to get it sent back to you to have to redo. Okay, interstate certification. So again, I mentioned this at the beginning, for those of you that are certified in multiple states, what's going to happen? Because, like, again, I'm in Pittsburgh, use myself for an example. I can be in Ohio or West Virginia in about 40 minutes from my house. And so, if I were operating a business like this, I would probably be certified in all 3 states or more. Heck, I can be in Maryland in probably about 50 minutes. So, first you get certified in your home state, and then you follow the new interstate certification process. This was new as of last year. A lot of you may not have realized it, but it's so much easier. It's essentially reciprocity for anyone who has had to try to get certified in another state. It's historically been difficult for many businesses. So the new process is once you're certified in your home state, or in this circumstance, recertified in your home state, you send a cover letter to the state where you wish to be certified, and you list all the UCPs where you currently have certification. You enclose a screenshot of the database in your home state showing that you are certified, and you ask to be certified in that state. You also have to include a new declaration of eligibility. This is the new version of the old annual affidavit that swears that you still meet all of the program qualifications. And new with this form is you do not need to have it notarized. So that takes a little step out of it for everyone. That makes it a little bit easier. So under the procedures set forth in the regulations that came out last year, the interstate UCP must confirm, validate your certification within 10 business days, make sure that you really are certified in your home state, and then they must immediately certify you in that state without further procedures. Whereas in the past, they would ask for your application, and you might have to go through a whole bunch of other stuff. So that is not supposed to be the case anymore. But right now we are uncertain how this is exactly going to work with the recertification process, obviously, because there are states like Illinois and Ohio that are ahead of the game versus other states who have barely even started thinking about this yet. So it remains to be seen how that is all going to work out for other states other than your home state. All right. And, Tim's going to talk about this more in detail, I'm sure, of how it's affecting the UCPs in the states. But, just to talk a little bit about, okay, well, where's the program right now? So essentially everything is paused. No goals can be set. There's no counting of participation right now. Nothing is going to be updated. No goals are going to be set until after every single DBE in that state is recertified. And then there's going to be disparity studies. And so it's still a little ways down the road here. The prompt payment rules remain in effect. So I'm sure everyone is happy about that. And also CUF reviews, commercially useful function reviews, are paused because, well, counting of DBE participation is paused, so it's not needed. What about contracts? So any contract that was awarded, signed, executed, everything before October 3rd with their DBE goals, it's fine, nothing's changing. But there's not going to be any counting of participation until the recertification process is over. And if the DBE in the contract is not recertified, under the guidance that came out, recipients must take, I'm reading this language, appropriate action to discontinue the effect of the old certification, and failure to do so can jeopardize payments. So how exactly that will play out is kind of a question. I can see a lot of potential litigation coming out of that, some headaches for sure. For any contracts that weren't signed on the dotted line prior to October 3rd, the DBE goals are going to be removed or zeroed out. And so, that's all just on hold for right now. what you should be doing right now if you are a DBE or ACDBE. You want to prepare for the recertification. Some of you may have already started to prepare. Some of you may have already started your personal narrative. Some of you may be working with, there's different organizations helping or attorneys helping. I've written several dozen personal narratives for my clients thus far, continuing to do that. So really it's something that if you can give it some thought and really, get thinking about it. There's a lot of different questions you can ask yourselves, ways you're disadvantaged. For my clients, I've developed a questionnaire. I think it's up to 80 questions. I just added some yesterday about all different aspects of your life and your business and your experiences to help kind of put that information together and find the best story for you. Watch your email for communications from your certifying agency. That's where you're going to find out the process and the instructions for how to submit to your certifier. And even though there are no hard and fast deadlines necessarily, the faster you all submit your recertification materials, the sooner the program can potentially continue here. So it is important for everyone to try to get them in so that the certifying agencies can get through the recertification process. You also want to be reviewing your marketing and business development strategies because we don't know how long this is going to take. And I know that a lot of you rely very heavily on the DBE program for your business. So you want to be out there exploring other ways to bring in business and whatever else you can do to open up new avenues for income for your firm. And you might want to also consider documenting the impacts to you and your business of this entire process here during this transition and pause in the DBE program, because that could potentially be information for your personal narrative. So those are the kinds of things you can start working on. Of course, you can start working on your personal net worth statement as well. Keep in mind that has to be current as of the day you submit. So you could put it together right now, but if you don't submit it for another 6 months, that information is not going to be current anymore. So that is the end of my presentation. I'm sure some of you will have questions that I look forward to answering. On the screen here, this is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me. If you need legal assistance for these personal narratives, please reach out to me. I'm doing these on a flat fee basis. Be happy to talk to you. My LinkedIn is listed here. I publish a lot of content and links to my content on LinkedIn. And also I've included a link to my YouTube channel. So thank you all, and I will turn the presentation over.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. That was a lot of good information. And so I'm happy to kind of piggyback on what Danielle has already shared. My name is Jennifer Todd, and I come to this conversation wearing a few different hats. I've spent 18 years in construction and 10 years in engineering. And along the way, I have had some incredible opportunities serving for ASCE's Industry Leaders Council, serving as the co chair for Risk and Resilience, and making history with NER magazine as a top 20 under 40 and top 25 newsmaker, the only person in history to accomplish that. And even still, I went back to get my law degree from ASU because I understood the regulatory landscape when we talk about the AEC communities. But the reality is this: even with all of the experience and the credentials and the recognitions, my firm, LMS General Contractors, was a DBE certified firm. And that DBE certification helped to open various doors for my organization. And so I understand what people are feeling. I understand the frustration of having the rug kind of pulled out from up under you. And when I think about the DBE certification, it's what allowed me to get into rooms and join teams and compete for work that we were absolutely already qualified for. So when we talk about the dismantling or the uncertainty around this DBE certification, I want to acknowledge how challenging and kind of gut punching this moment feels, but also how hard it is to break through and build relationships to be invited back to the table. So losing and even pausing the recertification feels like all of the work that we've done, all the effort that's been put into this is just kind of like vanishing. But as business owners and advocates, it's not a privilege that we have that we get to stand still. So the work doesn't vanish, the need for this program doesn't vanish. And so we have to pivot and adapt to stay in the game. And so I want to offer two tactical, practical actions that engineering firms can do to take right now. In addition to what Danielle said, do all of those things because that's what you need to do to stay in the game. But I want to add two more things to your list as it relates to it so that you are not just dependent on the certification and the federal language or waiting for the next rule update. And so the first thing that I want to share with you, if you are leading a firm or if you are a decision maker, is that lead with who you are, not what you are. So for many years, including mine, we introduced our certifications. I'm DBE, MBE, WBE, veteran owned. All of these things about our capabilities was on the back end. We were leading with the certification. And this is the moment when you really need to flip that completely. You need to be leading with your expertise, with your specialties, with your technical strengths, with the niche that only your firm can provide. Like, what are the problems that your firm, that you specifically are able to solve that your competitors cannot do? And then, after all of that, sharing exactly what you're capable of, then the added note is that you are a DBE firm and you have been impacted by the changes. Because the reality is that you want to be reframing your firm as a partner of choice, not as a compliance checkbox. It forces the clients to understand the value outside of the set asides. You don't want to live within your set asides. You want to be living with the experience and the expertise that you are able to perform. And the firms that will survive this transition will be the ones who are already communicating that they are indispensable outside of their certification. So, number two is strengthen every relationship that you have immediately. With this DBE status certification being uncertain, relationship capital becomes your strongest currency. Every engineering firm should be meeting with their project owners and primes that you currently support and having explicit conversations about how work continues through this regulatory shift, reinforcing your quality, your reliability, your technical excellence, and making sure that the decision makers can say your name when the room is closed. And you should really be asking direct questions. If I'm currently in this position as a DBE firm, not sure what happens to the future of my contracts and how my firm is going to be impacted, I'm asking questions like, how can we continue working together regardless of the certification changes? What value do we bring to you and how can we do more of that? And how do we stay on your radar for non-DBE projects? Because if primes are no longer required to check the box, that means that they want to have you there. And what you want to be working with and who you want to be working with are contractors and firms and owners who want you there. And that desire must be built on trust. It must be built on competence. It must be built on consistency. It cannot be based on certification, unfortunately. So right now, every DBE firm that is focusing on deepening these ties, you're not waiting, you're not hoping, you are making the case. And in addition to meeting with the owners on these DBE projects, you also need to be meeting with your non-DBE clients because you may need to offset some of that work if this becomes a problem or if you find out your contractor is a compliance contractor and not a true partner in ensuring that you continue to work with them. So I know this period is uncertain, and I know that DBE firms are really struggling right now to answer what happens next. But speaking as someone who has built a career across engineering and construction, someone who's been recognized at the highest level and still depended on the DBE certification program to access opportunities, I want to be clear that this is definitely a moment for action. It is not a moment for despair. So your value goes beyond the designation. Your expertise is what's still needed. Your work is still needed. And the firms that adapt the fastest will remain in the room even as that ruling changes. I will leave my information in the chat, my LinkedIn, as well as a docu-series that's on YouTube I created called Breaking Barriers, Women at Work, where we even highlight a civil engineer and what the challenges are of being a leader in the engineering field. I'd be happy to share that. If there are questions after this, please feel free to reach out as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Tim.
Thank you very much. I think I got this shared. I'm Tim Peters. I'm the local policy and technology engineer with IDOT. I'm here on behalf of APWA, and I want to talk a little bit about how this program's working. Let me see. There we go. A few statistics about Illinois. Illinois has 102 counties, approximately 1,300 municipalities, and 1,426 townships. So we have a lot of local agencies in Illinois. In fact, I think we have more local agencies than in any other state. We've had a DBE program for over 40 years at IDOT. Prior to the interim final rule, we had over 400 DBE engineering firms that were certified. And we had over 13,000 DBE suppliers. And when you think about that, we had a staff that would handle new firms that were coming in and look at recertification of firms maybe every 3, 4, 5 years. It's a minimum of 3 years and typically a little longer than that. So, we were well staffed. Things were working pretty well for IDOT. Then the interim final rule came out. All the old rules are gone, not based on gender or minority status, start over from scratch, no examples to work from, no states to copy from, everybody's starting over. And that just created a situation where there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenges. As Jennifer discussed, people that had been DBEs relied on that status, felt that it gave them a competitive advantage. They're uncertain. The people that did the work of certifying these, they're not sure what they're going to do. It's been a time where there's been a bit of a tug of war, and maybe there were some other small businesses that are looking at this and saying, hey, maybe this is an opportunity where we can get in this game now. So a lot of uncertainty, a lot of challenges. And remember that slide I had a couple slides back talking about the people that were certifying those DBEs. Now all of a sudden they've gone from a manageable workload to we're going to define a new process. We're going to do this as fast as we can and try to get back in this game and stay in this game and provide as much support for the DBEs and small businesses that depend on us as we can. And there are some conflicting goals. There's the desire to support small businesses. There's also a desire to save costs, accelerate schedules. We have one of the largest programs of all time in Illinois. We are under a state capital program. We know the federal government's been pumping out infrastructure money. We got a lot of work being done, and they want it done sooner, and they want it done with quality. Everybody wants to get recertified, but we also want to do these things in a fair and equitable manner. So it's some big challenges. And when we look at this, the impacts to local agencies, I mean, IDOT, we've canceled lettings or delayed projects. And when that happens, local public agency directors or public works directors must explain to their citizens and their boards why projects are being delayed. And then local agencies also have policies that require DBE certified participation. So their programs are impacted even if they're locally let, not at the state level. They have to make the decision whether they're going to zero their goals or whether they're going to pause a little bit and try to work with IDOT. But most local agencies don't certify their own contractors or consultants or suppliers. They depend on the state, so they're waiting on us. So it's just more pressure on the people that do this type of work for our agency. And finally, I'd say with great challenges, there are great opportunities. We have a very strong team at IDOT. And, is this something we wanted? Not necessarily, but we're going to do our best, and we've got some great people. And I appreciate this opportunity, and I'll turn it back to Matt.
Well, thank you so much, Tim and Jennifer and Danielle, for those great insights. Really appreciate you sharing your expertise. For our attendees, please continue to submit questions using the Q&A feature. There's a number of them already in there that I want to get through, which are just, I think, really excellent and broadly applicable. Let me start with Danielle on a few questions that we've gotten about the personal narratives and evidence of social and economic discrimination. And then I'll turn to the whole group about sort of implications for A&E contracts specifically. And then, we'll see what else comes in. So, Danielle, one of the questions I've seen in the chat and in the Q&A and that we've gotten from a number of our members is the removal of the presumption of a disadvantage based on sex or race, but can you include references to gender and race in your personal narrative? Someone pointed out, I think so many folks can identify experiences of microaggressions, instances of bias or discrimination, lack of opportunity. What's the intersection there, and how are you advising your clients on that question?
Yeah, so this is one of those huge questions that has come up because of the way both the IFR and the FAQs are drafted. For anyone who's familiar with the 8A program, that a few years ago went to a personal narrative very similar to this, but there, because it was a similar program relying that there were also some presumptions at that time of disadvantage for the same sort of categories of folks, that you had to make an individualized statement as to how you were disadvantaged because you were a woman or a person of color. The way the IFR was written and the way that some certifying agencies are interpreting it says that you can't rely on race or sex. And so it's been conflicting. I've heard conflicting positions from different certifying agencies. What I'm advising my clients is just put everything in there, especially if it's good. Like I've got a Hispanic client who just a year ago was on a job site and had people yelling Hispanic slurs against him like a year ago on a job site. My position's been put it all in there, make sure you have other things too that are not related to your race or your gender, just to be secure, because we don't know. I haven't seen anything saying, oh, if you mention that an experience because you were a woman or a person of color, we're throwing it out. I haven't heard that. It might just be maybe they won't consider those. And the other point with this is to potentially, something that you might initially think was because you were a woman or a person of certain ethnicity is, can you tweak that at all and come at it from a different perspective? For a woman, being a mom, being discriminated against because you were pregnant. Okay, that's a medical condition, and that's caregiver status. Both men and women can face issues in the workplace because of a medical condition or caregiver status. The same with race or ethnicity. Do you have a language barrier? Is there some cultural issues that you had when you came to this country in trying to assimilate to the culture, particularly in a business workplace? So coming at things from a slightly different angle, I think, is a good way to reframe for some of those things you might think, oh no, I can't include them.
The other question we get the most on this topic is relative to the subjectivity of certification, across states. Are you seeing, checklists or, criteria from certifying agencies? How do you think that will be handled across multiple jurisdictions? And, Jennifer and Tim, feel free to weigh in on this as well.
I know we've created one for our consultants, and that's been shared through our small business office. But I'm assuming other DOTs have as well, and work with the certifying agencies in your state to see what they have. I'm certain most, if not all of them, want to continue their programs and help continue DBEs and other small businesses to get engaged. I mean, we need more suppliers. We need more engineers.
Yeah, I think that is important to work with, your local state UCP and the certifying agencies, because it is subjective. And, I've been asked this question a million times, of course, and that's why I'm also saying, put as much out there. I hate to give more length to a personal narrative when these poor agencies are already having to review so much, but you don't know if you don't necessarily know what they want or what's going to check a box or get a certain score, you give them different options to go with. It helps you because it is subjective, and that is, to me, one of the biggest flaws with the interim final rule is just the total subjectiveness of it, and lack of criteria, lack of examples of what is or isn't. And I personally don't anticipate a whole lot of significant guidance from the US DOT just based on what I have seen since the beginning of the year.
Two other questions on certification, and then I want to move to questions about impact on contracts. Someone asked about employee ownership plans, and if you've got multiple owners, whether it's an ESOP structure or some other partnership, how do you handle that with respect to submitting individual personal narratives?
Yes, it's going to be the same way as you handled it whenever you originally sought certification, or whenever you are updating of any changes to ownership, as you would have to whenever there was a change in ownership. So unfortunately, yeah, it's a situation where anyone that is counting towards that 51% or more is going to have to submit a personal narrative and a new personal net worth statement. There is nothing written in there to make this any easier for multiple or many owner companies, unfortunately.
And lastly, on this point, have any of you seen any state or heard of any firm that has successfully been recertified yet under the new rule?
I have not, none of my clients who have submitted so far, like I said, I probably have about 24 individuals, I think, who have submitted so far. That's my rough guess, and nobody has received any response. I had understood that Ohio, at least as of a few weeks ago, in one of the webinars they did, I had at that time anticipated beginning to make decisions and reviewing in a week or two, but I have not heard of anybody going through that process successfully or unsuccessfully yet.
I don't honestly know if we have yet.
Sorry, I said that was the last question, but I do have one more, and I've seen it in multiple places. Are the personal narratives made public? I know there's a lot of sensitivity around, what to include there. Do you have any insights on that question?
They should not be made public. There are multiple places within the regulations that protect the confidentiality of particular information within the DBE program. For instance, when I do FOIA requests to the US DOT to get appeal decisions, a lot of times they come to me in a redacted form. That being said, well, I have a lot of confidence that the state agencies will keep them confidential. This particular administration does not always play by what we would expect. Um, you know, as I've told all of my clients, because I've had some clients share some deeply, deeply personal information that really, I want you to be comfortable with people reading this, not necessarily the public, but in particular, the certifying agencies. So I am, on the personal narratives that I am drafting for my clients, I am marking it as confidential and I am citing those particular portions of the regulations. Tim, I don't know if there's any procedures that Illinois is following. You'd be good to speak about that.
I'm not really in the DBE area. I deal more with the local agency side of it. But I know confidentiality in that area has always been held to the highest and strictest standard, and it would surprise me if they would get anything out of us.
Let me move to the impact on projects and contracts, those existing things that are in the pipeline and forward going. Can you all clarify? So this is a federal rule imposed by US DOT impacting federally funded projects. At this point, are states able to do what they want and continue their own DBE programs on state-only funded projects? Or does this impact them? Or could the court challenges potentially impact the state side?
I would say that it hasn't affected, it doesn't directly affect any kind of state programs right now. Whether or not that is the next target moving forward, who can say? But right now, no, it shouldn't affect the state and local, because I know that there are some counties and cities that have their own supplier diversity programs and certifications. Those should still be in play. So these changes are only on the federally funded transit and aviation type projects.
I would I would agree with that, but at the same time, only the really big uh cities like, and I'll use my example, Chicago, they may have a DBE certification program, but smaller communities rely on the states to certify them. So when you blew up our list, you blew up their list.
I would add something to that, not so much as what's going on, but because there is little information coming out federally, I think this is even more of a reason that you should be involved on the city and state level to understand what they deem acceptable and making those relationships from there. Keep it abreast of what's going on federally, but if you're able to get recertified through the state or you're able to access information sooner, then you should kind of be there and be on the ground to get that information and get as much information to as that you can.
And I think Jennifer makes some great points that strengthening those relationships and relying on people you've done business with in the past, reaching out and saying, hey, I'm still available. I'm still a good, landscaper. I'm still a landscape architect. I want to work with you. I had a great experience with you. Um, the bigger engineering firms aren't looking to gobble up that work that they had shared. I have some friends with larger engineering firms, and they're always looking for people to partner with. Good engineers are in demand, whether they're in small firms or big firms. And like Jennifer said, sell yourself on your strengths and your qualities, and that will help get that work and keep things going for you.
Hey, Matt, I see one question that's kind of recurring, and this is probably a Danielle question, and that is about what are the benefits of recertifying if there are no goals at this time?
That's a great question.
I think the benefit is it's to get it done. And the faster that everybody gets recertified, the faster that hopefully the program will continue and we can get new goals set. Some folks just want to get it done and over with. Some folks just don't want to wait and want to have that peace of mind. So it's really up to you. I think it's better for the certifying agencies if people start getting them in now than, if they're scrambling later. And that's a business choice for you as to what you want to do.
Yeah, certify, but be ready to switch up your business model if necessary, and in the interim.
Yeah, and one of the questions was, and this is for all three of you, we've seen several states indicate their intent to basically move to more of just a straight small business program. Do you see that happening across all states? Do you see that sort of being the intent of what US DOT is trying to accomplish here? What's the intersection between for small business programs and the more traditional or the DBE program as we've come to understand it?
I would say for me as a former contractor, being a Black woman engineer firm and its first generation, I needed this program to be able to have the access to the opportunities that I was qualified for. And so regardless of being a small business, that still didn't help me get in the door and be accessible to the larger contracts that are available. So being a small business doesn't really solve the problem for minority businesses and women-owned businesses, especially when we think that women engineers account for less than 20% of the industry. So being at the forefront on a large contract is significant in my ability to stay in the game. And I just don't think that having that small business set aside will help curtail anything when it comes to being a minority or woman-owned business if you are a small firm.
I also remind folks repeatedly there's sort of three legs to this stool. There's the pending judicial legal challenges, there's the regulatory activity now. And as someone noted in the comments and in the chat, I mean, this is a statutorily authorized program by the legislature. So Congress has a role here. I know the members of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee and Small Business Committee in the House have weighed in with DOT, and this will be an issue for the surface transportation reauthorization. To that point on the judicial challenges, Danielle, have you seen any legal challenges to the rule itself? Do you anticipate that happening, or are folks really just kind of focused on implementation and the transition to compliance?
No, unfortunately, I'm not aware of any legal challenges to it, which is disappointing. When I first read it, there's this thing in law school called issue spotting, and you look at all the different issues with something, and I was like, all right, there's this issue. I mean, it took me totally back to law school because there were just so many things that were potentially problematic in it. We have a deprivation of your due process rights. You know, the fact that the normal process for putting in this kind of rule was not followed. But unfortunately, what I think we're seeing is that there is no organization out there that has the money and the ability to mount a legal challenge. And I think that's why we haven't seen one, because I just think that with everything else going on, I know that there were some that intervened in the Mid-America Milling case, which is the pending legal challenge to the DBE program, which in my opinion, this interim final rule kind of takes care of that issue. But I just don't think there's anybody with the money and the ability to bring something forward, unfortunately.
Well, we're at the end of our allotted time, and unfortunately, there's a number of really great questions that I just don't think we're going to have the opportunity to get to. But I will say ACEC and I know our partners in APWA and ASCE are committed to continuing to put out educational programming and updates on this issue as they become available. So stay tuned to your various associations. And the speakers have all shared their contact information, so be sure to follow them and connect with them if you've got follow-up questions or issues too. Thank you so much to Danielle, to Jennifer, and Tim for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. Thanks for joining us. And again, as a reminder, this recording will be made available to all the registered participants. We'll also be posting it on the EWC website. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.